the game has changed. And that's, people don't like change. They don't like when new casters come in. They don't like change in general. The game has changed. And so the people at the start of this change looked at most games and said, what a fucking fiesta. Like, fiesta was really overused. And it's almost like as casters, we have to retrain and say, if you judge it based on the old Vision gameplay, yes, it looks like a fiesta compared to those old games. But you can't play that way, because if you play the old way, you just lose anyway. You need to take advantage of aggressive moves. Aggressive is the new norm, not just warding and leaving it there. And that's the kind of weird phase we've come out of. And I think now people appreciating what it is and not what it's not.
Remember what Kotick said? Change is good.
Yeah.
That's what Kotick...
It definitely isn't, of course. That's probably one of the stupidest sentences ever written by a human. Like, change is good. Like, okay, in that case, go up to the guy who said that, hit him upside the head with a wrench, and then take all his money and go, what do you mean you don't like change? Just change your financial and health state there. Of course, change is a ubiquitous comment. Could never be entirely positive, could it? Because everything's changing local. So everything isn't good, is it, you idiot? So anyway, there's two factors here. One, fuck that noise where they both tried to basically be like a shit version of Kazakhs as a human, where Papa was like, well, I roll with the times. It's like, first of all, you don't have any choice, so that's a pretty irrelevant comment. But
Agreed.
Then Loco, like, it's just the way it is. Like, great. Well, in that case, Loco, go tell everyone in Iran, don't bother protesting, just the way it is. Just roll with the times. Just get the times, boys.
Oh my God.
No, that is literally the same principle of what you just said, you cretin. It just doesn't apply to the specifics of this case. Secondly, here's the more interesting point, which is this. I will give you a counterpoint there, which is I don't ever buy the argument that the problem with this argument is it's so SK Telecom centric, yet none of you have mentioned SK Telecom. Like, you talked as though all Korean teams did this. No, what happened was this. If you go to any other season of League of Legends, you can find a team that plays incredibly aggressive and is very good, and incredibly passive and is very good. So go to season 4. Samsung White and Samsung Blue are on opposite ends of the spectrum. Both incredibly strong teams. You go to past seasons where even when SK Telecom was the best team, season 5, season 6, who do you have in China? A bunch of amazing teams at very aggressive play, at lots of skirmishing, fighting early on. Some of them didn't always make worlds, like some of the teams that Doinby was on, but there was always teams that could do this. My point there is, in every other meta I'm aware of in League, there was actually a spectrum. It just looked like there wasn't, because usually the best Korean team did play the more defensive style or did play scaling and vision based. So as a result, it's true, the best team was the one who played that. But I would say that's getting the cart before the horse. That's because it was the best Korean team, and that was the best region and the best team, and therefore the de facto number one in the world. My problem now is this, is that if you look at the current state, I would agree with you. The best teams are actually the teams that are playing aggressive around solo lanes. They actually go for kills and fights constantly. And the problem is you have teams who can like Team Liquid can sort of do that, but they have better players than most players in their region. SK Telecom is the best Korean team and can just about do that. And as Papa alluded to, most people don't even have them as the favorite for MSI. So I actually personally don't like this meta because I feel like it goes too far towards not allowing the other aspect. Like, yeah, let's allow all aspects, but let's not cut off half the game.
Here's what I'll say. I agree. The soul of your argument, I think, has a lot of merit. But the thing to say is that you have to also remember that the Korean style, the risk-averse warding style that worked at basically every world championship until the last one, is also the one that maps to international tournaments and really high-pressure scenarios the best, because you're putting down the wards and they're making the mistake. So the aggressive team always existed.
Reactive play.
But if you play the aggressive style in a warding meta 10 times under pressure, you're more likely to make the mistakes because the onus is on you to act, and the wards existed that those actions would always be seen. So it's one of those things where, international events are always going to be stressful. The safe way to play was also supported by the game very fundamentally. Now the safe way to play is not supported by the game in the same kind of way it was in the past. So the fun thing about this MSI, and the fun thing about SKT as an example, is SKT as an org, was actually, to me, kind of a garbage thing to talk about in terms of, SKT has always been this way this year, because this year was supposed to be the biggest difference, right? SKT is not, the soul of SKT is gone. Yes, Faker is there, and he's the center of SKT, but Faker being there and Coma being now kind of like more removed as a coach compared to, say, Zephyr, who's their drafting coach, there's not Bang, Wolf, Coma, Faker anymore. Like SKT is new in many ways. They're kind of a super team now, just like KT was 2 years ago. But the intriguing thing is that SKT, we've seen them beta test a lot of different what is SKT approaches to their gameplay since Casper Cup started to now. They tried to be a really aggressive early game team. They played around that and they were looking really good in the early game. And then they would reach one game where their draft wasn't very good or their gameplay fell apart, and they'd actually be a little bit wishy-washy for a week, and then it almost felt like they were a new SKT and they'd try something different. So like the SKT we saw by the end of playoffs was, all right, you try your gimmicks over there, we're going to see it through, and then we'll win because we went the standard way. And that does map to SKT Season 6, Season 5, Season 3 when you're thinking back to it. Season 3 less so, they were more aggressive back then, but 5, 6 especially did fit that way, and 7 as well.
I think they just realized we have Teddy and Faker. Like, these guys are actually really great team fighters later on. And then when they were...
And you're right in that. But as Thorin's saying, yes, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say, like, we got good team fighters, we can win team fights. But like Thorin's saying, the meta's actually screaming like, ooh, that's going to be hard. What about all the turret plays? What about the early game? And I think them actually going like, let's be an early game team. Ooh, we'll try the mid game, Elise comps. Okay, let's go to the late game, has actually allowed them to try out all the different identities to be able to bridge pretty healthily in a new meta that doesn't just support, wait it out. So while, yes, I would say overall SKT are, let's, be competitive, but largely Azir kind of team fighting the late game is going to be the way they prefer to play. They've played enough early game, and they're actually good enough to play early and mid game where they now understand those phases of the game in the confines of Season 9 meta good enough to get to the late game. Because you can't just play like SKT and go, yeah, let's choose those late game team fighting champions and win, and not just get steamrolled by early game. Like most teams, like IG is going to steamroll most teams that try to play late game scaling. Look at JDG in the final. They tried to play a late game, and IG was like, excuse me, and just smashed them in the early game. SKT know the phase of the game well enough that they're not just a late game team. They're definitely not strongest in the early game. They definitely would prefer not a bloody style, but I give them a lot of points for taking Faker and lots of established players and being like, let's go on this like spiritual journey where there are weeks where we're like, SKT seem pretty bad. And then by the end, be way more than the sum of those experiences and have learned a lot. There's a lot of development clearly shown by SKT, and none more so in Faker and Clid versus Faker and Blank. Like Faker and Blank.
Blank was bad.